On today's show, who are the best standout drafted prospects at the World Juniors? We'll talk about USA, Canada, and Sweden on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalikesh, QMJHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be covering the drafted prospects at the World Juniors and how they performed. This will be a two-parter. So in today's episode, we'll cover USA, Canada, and Sweden in the first, second, and third segments, respectively. Before I get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins, so visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day and leave us a rating review. It always helps the channel. Let's get started right away here with the draft prospects that stood out at the World Juniors. We'll focus on the big names, especially for teams like USA and Canada and Sweden. There are way too many drafted prospects to talk about, so we've selected a few standouts, either good or bad, to talk about in this episode. So let's start with USA. And there's obviously the two major ones on that big BC3 line in Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault. Talk me through their grades, how they performed at this tournament, and what they did.
They were fantastic. I mean, especially Ryan Leonard was the one driving the bus on that top line for Team USA. We are giving him an A for his efforts at this tournament because, I mean, he scored 5 goals, 10 points in 7 games, was second in team scoring behind Cole Hutson, the defenseman, but was really integral to putting the puck in the back of the net there for Team USA. As for Gabe Perreault, had the same amount of points, but was a bit less impactful, was perhaps fading into the background a little bit with James Higgins and Ryan Leonard really driving the offense on that top line. I know that you had some qualms with Perreault's tournament this time around, even though he's a player that both of us have a lot of appreciation for, especially at the NCAA level. But what were your thoughts on Gabe Perreault here at the tournament, and what grade did you give him?
Yeah, we ended up giving him a B, mainly because I feel like he was trying to play Ryan Leonard's role a ton. I think we talked about that a decent amount in our gold medal coverage for Team USA. I just think it was a step behind Leonard and Higgins at this tournament. Sure, Higgins was a draft eligible, surrounded by top end talent, and yes, Gabe Perreault remains an elite player, but in this tournament, I feel like he wasn't really playing to his strengths, was trying to bump down his grade to a B. We have a couple of defensemen to talk about as well, Zeev Buium and Cole Hutson. Now, Buium started off the tournament pretty poorly, didn't play his best hockey, was kind of limited offensively, but by the end of the tournament, he really came into his own and made the game-winning primary assist with his tongue out to Teddy Stiga on the breakaway in overtime against Finland to win the gold medal. That ends up earning him a B+. If it wasn't for that assist, might have been a B. But we give them that plus for the extra top end performance at the end of this tournament. And Cole Hutson outshined Zeev Buium throughout this whole tournament. Was the tournament leader in scoring. With 11 points in 7 games, and played wonderfully throughout this tournament. Dynamic offensively, creating everything for that top kind of core for Team USA. He was a play driver, even with the BC3 forwards on the ice. So that was a phenomenal tournament for him. So more than well deserving of an A grade at this tournament. But moving on to Trevor Conley, who is another pretty notable drafted prospect at this tournament. We ended up giving a B grade to Trevor Conley. Can you talk me through why?
Yeah, he had some really good dynamic flashes with the puck on his stick, especially. That said, I mean, he had 4 points in 7 games. He was playing in a middle six capacity, wasn't getting nearly as much power play time as that BC3 line, of course, but still was able to make an impact on the score sheet. But for what I noticed most was his impact in transition and just opening up passing lanes with his speed and his handling skill. He was really opening up the ice, allowing his line mates to get to the middle lane and finding them quite consistently as well. also thought that there were periods that he took a little bit off, that he was a pretty clear net negative in his own zone. So
Yeah.
there's always a bit of a give and take with Trevor Connolly. You're never going to get all good or all bad. There's always a healthy mix of the two. But overall, I thought that he was a net positive at this tournament and was really leveraging his skill and dynamic feet quite
Yeah.
effectively. Then we also have a pair of two-way centers to talk about here with Danny Nelson and Oliver Moore. And Oliver Moore had a little bit of a disappointing tournament this time around. We're giving him a B- grade. He's a really speedy centerman, has some really good defensive instincts, but there's always something a little bit lacking there, which was not the case with another center in Danny Nelson. Talk me between the difference between those two performances at the tournament.
Yeah, I feel like this is some of the best hockey I've seen from Danny Nelson at any
Yeah.
level. I mean, he was using his pace, using his physicality, winning battles down low, recycling puck possession, and just really winning a bunch of battles. And I think that was the difference between him and Oliver Moore. Oliver Moore has always been a player who leverages his skating, right? Like that's his main kind of tool. That's the way that he impacts the game. That's the difference maker in his game. But with his pure speed, he wasn't really able to leverage any advantages in the offensive zone or kind of extend possessions down low. I think Danny Nelson was just a lot more effective in his two-way center role than Oliver Moore was at this tournament. But we also have to talk about some support casts for USA that stood out. Brody Zeemer was great at this tournament. We ended up giving him a B plus. He's kind of the same style as Danny Nelson, winning a lot of battles down low, going to the net, driving the paint, doing all the things that lead to those dirty goals. And he developed some really good chemistry with some of the Team USA kind of bottom six casts, including Teddy Stiga, who scored the overtime winner for Team USA. Which I think only one person I've seen online predicted that. Nathan Grav, shout out to you for having that prediction before overtime there. Talk me through what makes Stiga special and what led him to hop into the lineup here for David Carl and just have an instant impact in this gold medal game.
Yeah, I mean, Teddy Stiga's game is based off of intelligence, playmaking, and pace. He's a really relentless winger, and we saw that as well on that game-winning goal for the gold medal victory in overtime against Finland. It was intelligence, anticipation that allowed him to get that breakaway. He saw that space, was attacking it. He knows that Zeev Buium is constantly looking to make that kind of a stretch pass, and even if it had been a dump out instead of a direct pass, Stiga would have won that race behind the net. So he just started sprinting up the ice towards the blue line, and it was a really good read from both players to connect on that one, and an inch perfect pass as well. So it ended up turning out really nicely. But I think overall, what Stiga brought to the lineup at this tournament, and he got into 6 of the 7 games as well. He was only scratched the one time, and he had 3 points in that span. I thought that he was just constantly adding energy whenever he was on the ice, and
Yeah.
whether he's playing on the fourth line or the third line, wherever it may have been, or in overtime at 3-on-3, he was always ramping up the intensity and leveraging that combination of pace and playmaking really effectively.
Yeah.
And he's a player that I think both of us have a lot of love for in terms of just the style of play. But completely different style of play, but still had a very good tournament. Cole Eiserman played a very sheltered role, but for the best, in our opinion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He was played in exactly the situation he needed to, and he bought into David Carl's game plan perfectly. He was playing as the 13th forward in this tournament and was playing top power play minutes. That was basically what he was doing at this tournament. Is just being placed in positions where he can leverage his standout tool, which is his elite level shot. He ends up earning a B grade along with Stiga and Zemer, a B plus grade rather. And Eiserman has just been he's been exactly this for the NTDP in college. He's a sniper, right? And when you have a sniper who doesn't really impact the game outside of that, usually you can place him in this role, and he just has an instant impact. So he scored some key goals at key times for Team USA, where they needed a guy to just walk in off the rush and just snipe at one time through a goaltender. Like he was able to do that perfectly. So he was placed in a good position and played the best minutes that he could play. I think he deserves a B plus, despite the fact that he was a kind of 13th forward for USA. And finally, Trey Augustine, who played in net for Team USA for pretty much the whole tournament, earns a B plus. He had a pretty rough start to the tournament. I think especially that game that they lost against Finland, he could have been way better than he was against Germany as well. He struggled a bit, but his game against Canada was phenomenal. And despite a bad start against Finland in the gold medal game, he ended up really kind of holding the fort down by the end of it, and played a really good tournament overall. I think what was a 917 save percentage at this tournament? Is that right?
I believe it was a 916, but yeah, right in that range. Really solid
Something in
hockey
that range.
overall. Yeah, it balanced
Definitely
out there.
respectable.
Yeah.
Absolutely, definitely respectable from him. 2.52 goals against average. Decent stuff from Augustine overall. I think he's shown to be a bit vulnerable on the glove hand side, but overall, I think if you take everything into consideration, a B plus is reasonable for Augustine at this tournament. A couple of surprise standouts, really quick. Joey Willis played a couple games and played really well. Brandon Svoboda was great in the bottom six and scored a decent amount of points. And on defense, Drew Fortescue and Adam Kleber were kind of the two standout defenders outside of the big two offensive producers there. Both didn't really earn a point at this tournament. Both had played some really solid defensive minutes and are more than worth a mention. That's our first segment done. We'll get to our second segment here where we talk about the faded Team Canada team. We'll talk about their performers, who stood out, all that good stuff in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors.
From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need to place live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Whether you want to take your swings on American football with the NFL or European football with the Champions League, the choice really is up to you. Or perhaps you're a bigger fan of tennis or golf, or maybe, just maybe, you are a hockey fan if you are listening to this podcast. Whatever it may be, FanDuel is something to offer every kind of sports fan. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so moving on to our second segment here, we'll be talking about Team Canada's standout drafted prospects. Now, we all know by now our thoughts on this Team Canada selection group, and the job that Dave Cameron and the GMs and the scouts did in terms of the selection of prospects that are going to be playing here, and the Lions as well. So we won't get into that ad nauseum, but let's focus on the drafted prospects here and how they performed at this tournament. Let's get Ethan Cowan out of the way. I don't think it was nearly as bad as people kind of made him out to be online. I think that's just kind of unwarranted, the level of hate this kid was getting. But at the same time, he didn't play the best tournament. I'd give him a C plus. I think we can both kind of settle on that. Was selfless at times where he should have been selfish, was selfish at times that he should have been selfless, hanging on to pucks when he shouldn't, passing them off when he shouldn't. It's just the selection, the play selection and decision making from Easton Cowan was off. But overall, played some decent two-way minutes, showed some effort, showed some drive. He still deserves a C plus grade in our opinion. That's pretty much the best that we can do with Cowan, though. I think any more than that, you're getting a bit generous for this tournament, but he's still a phenomenal prospect. He's going to be playing top 9 minutes for the make-believes for a while. But, he wasn't the only one that was either underperforming at this tournament or just didn't live up to expectations. Bradley Nadeau had a rough tournament in this game, but I think wasn't he the leader in goals scored for Team Canada with 2?
He was indeed. He doubled any other of his teammates in goals.
Yeah, no. So B minus for him. He did the one thing that he does really well, which is score goals. Both of them were power play shots. In classic Bradley Nadeau fashion. But he didn't really impact the game at 5-on-5 as much as he could. Again, play selection issues, decision making issues. I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of chemistry on this Canada team. But yeah, B minus for him. He scored the most goals for Canada, but again, 2. That's not enough goals. Callum Ritchie though was pretty good. I thought he was the only one on that top line to start the tournament that really lived up to expectations in terms of playmaking, play driving. Right, like he was kind of the standout there. And despite that, he still gets a B. Because I still think he underachieved expectations on that team. Now let's talk about some of the support casts. Talk with your Braden Yeager's tournament and what we ended up settling on as a grade for Yeager.
Yeah, the Canadian captain had a fine tournament. I mean, he was tied for the lead in scoring with Easton Cowan with 3 points, all assists in those 5 games. I think in terms of grade, we settled on a C plus for this player because there was some defensive upside with Yeager. He was shutting down opposition lines decently well at times, but the offensive pop just wasn't there. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was a reason he was kind of demoted to that third line midway through the tournament. I thought that was where he probably should have started as well, and where he was most comfortable. But I think in that capacity, he played fine. He wasn't the problem with this Team Canada, but he wasn't exactly a big part of a potential solution either
Yeah.
on the ice. And I thought that there were limitations in his ability to just take control of shifts. And as like the captain of Team Canada, one of the older players in the tournament, you were hoping for him to do a little bit more of that, perhaps.
Yeah.
But still, like I thought that he did the best he could within the system that he was given,
Yeah.
and there was not much to do within that. Berkeley Catton, for his part, got a lot of playmaking opportunities there for Team Canada. Was really leveraging his pace well in transition, but still only ended the tournament with a single point and an assist in those 5 games, despite being really stapled into that top 6, almost surprisingly going into the tournament. That had not like we
Yeah.
thought even
It
before the
wasn't
tournament
expected.
he might be a cut because he's an undersized D+1, and if Beckett Seneca isn't making it, why would Catton? But he did, and he played quite a few minutes, but he struggled to gain chemistry with his line mates. He played largely with Gavin McKenna and Luca Pinelli. And
Yeah.
speaking of Luca Pinelli, I'm going to take this one because I think you might have a little bit too much frustration still with Pinelli's tournament.
Yeah. Yeah. Just go
Um,
ahead.
the utilization was the biggest problem with Pinelli here, not the
Was
player
it?
himself. Yes, it is. He should not have been playing on that second line. He was not a particularly good compliment to either Berkeley Catton or Gavin McKenna. I think that putting a guy like Carson Rakoff in that spot, or Porter
Yeah.
Martone, would
Porter
have made a really
Martone or
big difference. Or a
literally
lot
anyone
of
else.
Beckett
Yeah.
Seneca, Michael Misa, the list goes on.
Yeah.
But Luke Pinelli, I thought he had that one goal where he got to the middle of the ice, but still, this is a player that is an off puck mover and an opportunistic goal scorer, which just isn't what you need to complement McKenna and Berkeley Catton.
Yeah.
And that said, he still gets a C+ because he wasn't very good at this tournament
Yeah.
regardless. So it was quite painful here for Canada. I think we could have also been meaner on some of these grades. I think
Yeah.
we stayed within the C range for just
For
kindness'
pretty
sake.
much everyone. Yeah.
Pretty much everyone. But do you want to talk me through a pair of players that did play a bit better than the rest in Jet Luchenko and Tanner Molendijk?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, Luchenko played his role exactly. He was your classic bottom 6, defensive shutdown forward. Played a bunch of penalty killing minutes, did pretty well with them, and just was able to suppress offense a ton. But wasn't really able to create it either. But honestly, no one on this Canada team was able to create any sustained or consistent offense outside of Gavin McKenna. So Luchenko ends up earning a B- for that, just being exactly what we expected him to be at this tournament. I think it's decent enough. And Tanner Molendijk for me was probably one of the best Team Canada players at this tournament, and he still earns a B. Tremendous shutdown defensive skill, especially with that elite level skating that they leveraged consistently to get back and stop rushes, and just close gaps so effectively. So I was really impressed with Molendijk's tournament. He's gonna look really good for the Predators for a while there. I think it was a very good tournament from him. On the flip side of that, Sam Dickinson had one of the worst games I've ever seen against Finland there, especially in that first period. Oh my goodness, like everything went wrong for Dickinson. And it's really a testament to how good Matt Schaefer is that Sam Dickinson wasn't able to live up to a second pair role, right? Like this, Dickinson is a whole year younger, was drafted in the top 10 in the 2024 NHL draft.
Older.
What?
You said he's a whole year younger.
Oh, my bad. He's a whole year older than Matt Schaefer, and was still not able to live up to what Schaefer was doing on that second pair. So, I don't think it's really a slide on Dickinson. It's just, his decision making has always been an issue, and in a system with that tight of a structure, you need him to be able to make better decisions in that, and he was just not able to live up to Matt Schaefer's role in the second pair. On defense, one more player, Andrew Gibson earns a C+. I think that he wasn't made for this team. He wasn't made for the way this team is built. He's a great box out, chip and chase defenseman, but in a system that favored a lot of point shots, having pretty much the most static blue line shooter I've seen on at Team Canada at any level. be your top pair defenseman, be the guy that you rely on to play those big minutes both offensively and defensively. It just wasn't working out for Canada, so he earns a C plus. Last player for Canada, Carter George, earns an A. He's the main standout from this group. Was phenomenal at this tournament. So composed, so calm. Played the puck a ton. Allowed
Yeah.
his defenseman made breakouts so easy for his defenseman with those interventions behind his net on rim passes. Was really impressive at this tournament. He earns an A. What was it? A 936 save percentage? Was that right?
It is indeed. He put up really, really good numbers behind a very, very not good team.
Yeah.
So he deserves a mention for that, especially. Yeah.
Absolutely, and yeah, no surprise standouts for Canada. Let's keep it short on that side. There's really no one that stood out in any surprising way. And in fact, barely anyone stood out at
Positively, at
all.
least.
Yeah, I mean, you could put Gavin McKenna in that role just because he was like 16 heading into this, turned 17 midway through the tournament, and was still like one of the most, if not the most, impactful forward on Canada. But even that's a stretch. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third segment here where we talk about Sweden and their plethora of standouts at this tournament. Even though they didn't even medal, they still had a bunch of very impressive performances at this tourney. We'll talk about that in a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors. Did Rocket Money help you find subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track all of them down. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one single place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton of money. And plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside a certain amount of money for my future, so no more stressing about budgeting every month. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and help reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Alrighty, so final segment. Let's talk about Sweden, who had a great tournament in terms of individual performances at this tourney. Despite not medaling at the end of the day, they lost in the bronze medal game to Czechia, but still had a phenomenal couple of individual performances. And we need to start off with Felix Ungersorum, who was absolutely phenomenal for Sweden at this tournament as a forward. Connective play, constantly finding seams, was the best playmaker, I think, in this whole tournament, barring maybe some couple of exceptions. James Higgins was up there and a couple more, but Ungersorum was very much one of the best in this tournament in terms of connecting play and finding seams. So he earns an easy A grade at this tournament, right?
Absolutely, he does. I mean, he had nine assists and 10 points in this tournament. He really was the playmaking fulcrum for Team Sweden here at the World Juniors, and just that playmaking ability off the boards paired with the high-end motor has
Yeah.
been a lethal combination going back to his draft year, and he's only expanded that and added more tools into that toolkit since then. He's become a lot more of a cohesive player. It was very much like a theoretical projection in his draft year, and he's just really blossomed into a play driving playmaker, and he was
Yeah.
exactly that at this tournament, tying Axel Sandy Pellikka for top in scoring for the team. But speaking of Sandy Pellikka, he was also very, very good. 4 goals, 10 points, 7 games. Power play, not quarterback, power play shooter,
Yep.
finisher.
He was in the
He
Ovi
was
spot.
a trigger man on that
Yep.
power play unit and was doing a really excellent job at it. I know that you had perhaps a couple more questions about his two-way impact at this tournament, where Tom Verlander and Theo Lindstein perhaps played a bit more effectively in those
Yeah.
capacities. But what stood out for you so positively for Sandy Pellikka, apart from the goal scoring on the power play?
Just elite creativity in hands. Like his shootout goal against Finland, his first, that was absolutely ridiculous. Like that was a forward's move. Generally phenomenal hands, tools, especially in terms of puck skills, really up there with the best in this tournament. I just think that in his final 2-3 games, he kind of tapered off a bit. He really had his best impact in the first half of the tournament, but he still earns an A plus for us at this tourney. But so does Tom Willander. He also earns an A plus at this tourney, mainly because of how impactful he was in all 3 zones, while also showing the level of creativity, inventiveness that you wanted to see kind of Willander develop. very few weaknesses in his game. He's able to impact the play in all three zones, show up in all three zones, make really good plays in all three zones. I think that overall, he had the more consistent and impactful tournament of the two. But you can't look around ASP's performances at this tourney. He was phenomenal. Theo Lichtenstein was also the big standout on defense for Team Sweden. He earns an A grade mainly because he wasn't as impactful offensively as the other two, even though he's starting to show a bit more comfort, a bit more poise on the puck than we've seen from him before. His kind of game is still defense oriented, but he's gotten more comfortable with the puck, and that was very very clear on that second pair with Tom Verlander. David Edstrom had a great tournament as well. He earns an A grade. It's really the defensive performances and just the grit that he showed throughout this whole tournament that earns him this grade, right?
It really is. I mean, David Edstrom has always been a really, really solid two-way centerman who puts in just as much effort defensively as he does offensively. But I think I was personally more impressed with his offensive contributions at this tournament because I expected the defensive ability to be there. I was
Yeah,
expecting him to be among the premier defensive centers at this tournament. But the offensive production, the goal scoring, I mean, he had 4 goals and 6 points in 7 games. And the goals he scored were very David Edstrom goals, like
yeah,
in tight, gritty, rebound, redirect, just getting his stick on a puck in any way he can. But I thought that he did a great job at boxing out defenses, just inhibiting sight lines for goaltenders, making just really creating chaos
yeah.
down low for the opposition, and also had some more flashes of comfort on the puck and handling through pressure that I hadn't seen in the past, which was nice to see. Another center I thought that was really really fantastic. Played wing as well. But Anton Wahlberg, excellent tournament. 4 goals, 8 points. But it was the combination of goal scoring threat and power that
Yep.
was really impressive to me. We saw that on the power play as well. He was forcing his way to the middle of the ice. He's no longer this pure finesse big guy that he was in his draft year. He's really learning to lower the shoulder, force his way through the opposition, and especially against junior competition like in this tournament, that has a very, very big effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Outside of that, though, we had a couple of decent-ish performances from two-way forwards. Felix Nilsson, Linus Eriksson earned some Bs at this tournament for their defensive play. But outside of that, I think the main issue with Sweden and why they didn't medal was the lack of of offensive skill depth. Right, like they had to settle on a couple of key pieces to perform.
Yeah.
Ingresorum, Edstrom, Sandy Pelika, Villander. Those are kind of the big names producing a ton. You can throw Anton Wahlberg in there as well, but there just wasn't enough skill depth. They had a bunch of two-way forwards who played decently well, but I think they could have had a bit more skill in this roster that could have helped them kind of push past it. Otto Stenberg was one player I thought that was able to bring a bit more depth scoring, but I didn't like his tournament, not in terms of on paper, in terms of what he was able to do in games. He's an incredibly fast forward, but he sometimes skates just too fast for his own brain. His decision making was really all over the place. There was one specific sequence in the gold medal game in overtime where he got the puck, started circling the offensive zone for 20 seconds, and had a bunch of opportunities to dish off the puck and keep offensive zone time circulating. But instead, after 20 seconds of keeping the puck on the stick, he just passed it straight to Team USA. Um, and those kinds of situations were sorry, in the bronze medal game that was against Czechia. He passed it straight to Team Czechia's stick. But basically, the decision making was all over the place. But for me, Aaron's a B minus despite the point totals. And yeah, I still think there's another layer of decision making that Stenberg can add to his game. Finally, let's talk about the goalies because surprisingly, the starting goaltender for most of this tournament actually ended up playing worse than the backup. So Melka Thurlin with a C plus grade and Marcus Gidloff with a B grade, mainly because of what Gidloff was able to do, especially in that gold medal in that bronze medal game. Despite the loss, he was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Stopped, I think, was it 12 of 14 shooters against Czechia, or was it 11 of the 14? But
I
still a
think it's
high number.
11 of 14, but once you're in double digits of shootout attempts save, I think you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, no, it was absolutely phenomenal from Gidloff in that game. But Thelin also had just a couple of rough games. Like there were some shots that were going in that really shouldn't, leading up to the semifinals. And yeah, overall, Gidloff just outplayed him at this tourney. Let's close things off with 4 surprise standouts at this tourney. Rasmus Bergqvist of the Montreal Canadiens, 7th round pick. I think the before last selection of the 2024 NHL draft
Yeah.
as an overager performed really well at this tournament out of nowhere, right?
He really did. He was very solid, was comfortable activating offensively. I thought he played his best hockey with Axel standing Pellikka, and
Yeah.
that's what you want to see from your depth players is elevating their games when they're playing up the lineup. I thought that he was really solid and certainly a player to keep an eye on. I also thought that Herman Traff stood out. I mean, he had that fantastic 2-goal display on his birthday on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
But even when he wasn't on the score sheet, he was playing with intensity and physicality, getting to the middle of the ice, and playing some pretty effective hockey in that bottom six for Sweden,
Yeah.
as well as Zeev Buium was really getting involved offensively, kept his feet moving, had some flashes of dynamism. Like if you're talking about like depth skill in Sweden, Zeev Buium is one of the premier names in that capacity. But last but not least, talk me through Viggo Gustafsson and how he was at this tournament.
Yeah, some good some good two-way defense from him at this tournament. I think Sweden overall had a really good defensive core, and that's the main reason why they were able to make it to kind of contention for a medal. And Viggo Gustafsson another key part in that. I thought he was a very mobile, very active offensively, pushing into offensive rushes really comfortably, and just skating pucks out of his zone really comfortably as well. Great overall impact from him at the tourney. I still think it's a shame that Sweden was falling short because basically they had so many good players that played really good tournaments, and Gustafsson is no exception to that. In a bottom three defenseman role, played really solid minutes offensively and defensively. I liked him. But that's our final segment done, and that's our episode done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of January. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you tune in next time.